It's not easy living on a dying planet, but it is easy to feel overwhelmed when it comes to making changes and taking action to try and save it. Where do you start? Is it even worth it? Can you really make a difference? Welcome to the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast, where we attempt to answer these questions by spilling the tea on living sustainably in a world that's going to shit. I'm Brandy.
And I'm Hannah. And for years we've been navigating the big, messy grey area of caring about our planet. It hasn't always been smooth sailing, but we're not giving up yet. So, brew yourself a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's try and navigate that grey area together.
Hello, Give a Shitters. This is Brandy.
And this is Hannah. And you are listening to number 25 of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast.
And I still have not found a recorded woo to put in or clapping or anything. So, awkward segue from the welcome to the topic of the episode.
Okay. I think I should just do that next time. That was more awkward.
Do you want to do a woo?
Woo! Yeah.
There we go. All right. Now we can officially start. All right, Kishers, welcome to today's episode where we're going to expand on something I only had like a couple minutes at the end of episode 24 to touch on. It's from an article in talking about like the different roles, and one of them was how do they word it? It was like how your individual roles, like you have a bigger impact than you think, and one of them was like leadership or something. Something about organizations, anyway. And then you had a note in that outline, I think, about, how we view, like, groups, organizations, companies, as if they're, like, not made up of individual people. So today we'll try to dive a bit deeper into that. And I kind of want to, I think this is more of, like, a mindset topic for me. Mm-hmm. Because, that's a common thread throughout a lot of our episodes. I think that you change your mindset, and that changes more than just, what reusable shopping bag you bring to the store and the small things like that.
Okay.
So, because it is, I think I definitely fall into the mindset of like a kind of an us versus them. Well, there's a couple things. There's like individual action versus collective action. But then I think when I was doing this outline, corporate like responsibility came up a lot for me. So I know those are kind of different things. Like you can make changes yourself or join a group that is making changes together. So, but I think maybe this is more of a kind of a corporate organization, those big players that have a disproportionate amount of, greenhouse gas emissions.
Can you, when you're talking about that, are you talking about companies or are you talking about countries?
Companies,
okay.
Because I do view them as kind of like us versus them, like us, the little people, the individuals, the consumers, versus them, this like, I don't know, like I know logically, like there are a lot of people that work in these companies, fossil fuel companies, consumer good companies, but like I feel like I do kind of think of them as like an individual entity. So
it's a very sorry. I was going to say, it's just like a very weird function of companies, especially the big ones, that you do kind of think of them as like as they have a kind of power of their own, almost like as the company, like the company is a thing, like a living entity, which I think it probably is in some ways, but it is also made up of people.
Mm-hmm.
So but also it's like a weird sci-fi kind of like living monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Made up of individual people. Yeah. No, that's a good way to visualize it.
Cogs. Just like
that's a good way to visualize
humans running on cogs, but the company is like its own beast.
Its own like Godzilla or something made up of
exactly.
Of people.
Like making hand gestures at the moment, listeners. What I think this company looks like. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a sidetrack.
No, I like that. I like that visualization. Well, I think that's a good point, because in the US at least, I remember this fact, and I found it again. I think it was like a Stuff You Should Know YouTube video that that companies in the US are given like personhood. Like that is what allows the company to enter into a contract versus the person who owns the company. So in a legal sense, they are like it's their own thing, separate from the people that make them up. I don't know if that's a grammatically correct way to phrase that sentence, but
interesting. I mean, it's very weird. I mean, so I work for I guess what would be considered like a medium-sized company directly. I think we're about 300 people, which already feels like a lot on a practical level. Like I don't know most of the people, but then that company is like owned and we get training, and it's like a subsidiary, I guess, of like a much larger company. And that is like kind of interesting. You just see how it kind of like sprawls across the globe, you know. It's like, and like, you know, it's fascinating. You know, you have all this training that mentions like, you know, what to do about bribes, like what you can accept, like different countries, like, okay, you might work in a country where it's considered acceptable to accept bribes, but like our company policy is that you can never accept bribes, for example. So you see all of these like different like tendrils like across the globe. And then, you know, when you have these like trainings, you can be like talking with people who like work in completely different roles, but we're also, I mean, things I've never even heard of. Most things I've never heard of. And yet they're working in the same company, being paid by the same company. Anyway, I don't really know where it's going with that, but it is just, it's true. Like you work for even working for something, the company with a capital T and a capital C, like feels like its own thing.
Yeah. Because I'm sure in like your contract, in your, I don't know, training brochures, it says, you know, at this company, these and companies have their own values, separate from the values of the individuals. I mean, it's great if your values as an employee align with the company. But yeah, they have their own like their own brand and values and messaging.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like that was kind of a sidetrack, but there we go.
That's okay.
Did you have a specific point you wanted to talk about? I mean, I know you had lots, but where would you like to start this conversation, Brandy?
I guess it's, I mean, kind of the underlying theme of all of our episodes is like making changes in our own lives despite knowing that, you know, a small group of companies have the biggest footprint or responsibility.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of, like, I'm guilty of this, or I have like these kind of parallel things of like, okay, I can make changes in my own life, the way I eat, slower travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, while knowing that, you know, it's what is it, like 100 companies are responsible for like 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. Can't remember where. I think that's a common stat, but I'll link wherever I found it. And a lot of them are fossil fuels. So it's like, I live my life with these two kind of different, like knowing that the individual actions that I do or changes I make have a smaller impact just like contained to my own life than these companies. But it's like, okay, that's okay with me because I want to live by values and I know there's a ripple effect. But I don't know, is there a way to, I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. Is there a way to kind of bridge those two parallels and start viewing these companies at like they are made up of individual people? So whether it's like, I don't know, for starters, communicating with them more. Like it's not like, oh, we have no impact on them aside from like a consumer goods, for example, like not shopping from them. Like because they feel so separate, my only interaction with them can be supporting them or not with my money. But like they're made up of people, so therefore there are people that we can talk to.
Yeah.
So that to like spur them to do better, just like, you know, when they say, you know, call your, you know, local politician's office, local representative's office. I don't know. That's always felt. I feel like for me, there's always been that barrier of like, okay, but like, are they really going to listen to me? Because they're this like, I don't know. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm like, what am I feeling? I do feel.
How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, it's an interest. I was just trying to think about that because there's a part of me hearing that kind of still feels a bit like what you just said, like, why would they listen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like probably the person who is like dealing with your complaint probably, or query or suggestion, has probably got minimal power. They're just on a customer service team sometime somewhere, like having to send out another, like, oh no, this person's written to us again about X, Y, and Z issue. Like, here, let me send back my stock email. Like, does it get to the decision makers? So that's like this part. But then the other part, which is that some people, well, I think we do all have some power, including in the workplace, but it is true that certain people have much more influence over what happens, the direction of a company. And those, they are people. So there could be ways that you could impact, but I'm kind of thinking you kind of have to have a personal relationship with that person. You just happen to make friends with the next CEO of Shell,
Chevron,
I don't know. Right? I don't know though. I don't know. But maybe that's like a defeatist attitude, because then it's that going back to like the company is its own thing and whatever we do doesn't have an impact on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that someone already working within a company has more power to change it from within than like we do, right, complaining to them. I think that was one of the points that article made about working in an organization. And as you have the potential to move up in leadership, that's then the more power you have to like change something.
Yeah. And I think, I guess if you work within a company, like for example, in my company, there's like pretty big like networks. There's like a women's network, LGBT network. There's like a diversity and inclusion network, like across multiple countries. I haven't got involved in any of those, but I think those kind of places can be a positive place to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like within your company, whatever your role, if you work for the kind of company, and I think most companies these days want to look at least like they're doing it's environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
If you can find ways to participate in those opportunities, you might have a disproportionate impact regardless of your role.
Yeah. Because it's changed from within, because we can kind of give our input on the outside if it's like, consumer good, of like buying it or not. But and who was it that said every job is a climate job? I can't remember.
I don't know.
Was it one of the
good quote though?
Was it someone from Project Drawdown? I think. I can't remember. If I find it, I'll link it. So I think. I mean, and it all comes back to mindset, and like that quote is a perfect example. Yeah, like whatever your role, wherever you're at, like there is something you can do. And I think there are still parallels, because that kind of change, unless you are the top decision maker, can take a long time. But you said unless you happen to run into the next CEO of like Shell, well, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but maybe someone you do meet will be the person that runs into them, or someone that they know, or someone that they know. Because I think there's an element here of like, that ripple effect of kind of changing like the social norms. And you do that. I personally do that by starting like making change in my own life, and then people see it and then talk about it, and it becomes more of like a common thing. Yeah. And I think that can happen within a company too. Yeah.
I do think this is going off on a slightly different issue, which I haven't noted in your outline. So, but that's fine. No. I was just thinking about, I think one of the things that feels really hard and is purposely done like this by big companies is that they're so multinational. We're talking about, in a way that as an individual, we're kind of normally part of like one country or like two, or maybe a few countries, but there's like, as a member, as it were, I'm like a member of this country, but then like, corporations like span the globe, and often will purposefully, they'll register themselves in countries that have, lower taxation, lower, like, they like juggle, right? They like play, where can they get away with like cutting back on like climate issues around like international law. These are all things I know very little about, so I don't know, maybe this isn't a productive conversation to have, but it's just something on my mind where I'm like, maybe there's a way, and if we engage with like international like law making processes, or like how, I don't know how you do that, but like, yeah, I don't know. Help me out here, Brandy.
I don't know either, but
these thoughts too, but yeah.
But your tangential thought reminded me of a point I did want to make about how these companies do distract us with individual responsibility, guilt, carbon footprints, etc., so that they can go on, destroying the planet, making their money. I think it was an article I linked in a previous outline that we didn't really touch on. I forget which one, about people will say, okay, well, I forget, was it Shell or one of the big oil companies invented carbon footprint to like make us feel guilty. And it's like not completely true. Like, it was, I think, created before it was used as a guilt and distraction tactic. And it's not that we don't have a car. Like, people will say that, I've read online that they'll say that as a way to like
discredit
kind of not discredit it, but like to say, oh, well, they just invented it to make me feel bad, so I don't have a carbon footprint, or I don't have to worry about my individual actions. So I don't think that's necessarily true. We all do have an impact, but we would, regardless of what our world looked like just existing means we have some sort of impact. So it's true that we do have a carbon footprint individually. It's true that it was used as a distraction tactic. I don't think that means you could just say, oh, I'm gonna use all the oil, and I'm gonna start my own oil company. Like, I'm gonna drive more. I'm gonna eat more meat because my individual footprint doesn't matter. I think it still does, but still recognizing that how it's used, so that we're not focusing on the fact that such a small number of people. I'm gonna say people instead of organizations. Have the biggest impact, and they're making us like feel bad about it and make changes when they're the ones who need to make serious changes. Because part of also what sparked this episode, go ahead, you respond and then I'll share.
Okay. I was a very tenuous thought. Let's see if I can put it into words. Thinking back to last week's episode, we talked a lot about shame.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Sorry. So 2 weeks ago. And how we can shame, like, it's so much easier to shame an individual, whether that's someone else, perhaps because when, again, it's like this like human versus the company like thing, where it's like, how can I, like, it doesn't feel real to think, oh, I can like shame Shell. But it's easy to shame a person. And then I also like, though, your distinction. And the other part of that was, it's also easy when we work within a company and on a job that we can like for good and for bad. And I think there's a reason why, but we can like deflect what the company does as like not being part of our own actions, because sometimes in the workplace we feel like there is a limited choice of what we can do, which is true, right? Like, it is this weird thing. You do things at work that you don't necessarily like 100% agree with, or you might feel a bit awkward. I'm sure both of us have had moments maybe in climate change or not, where we felt, oh, not sure about this. But people are the ones making decisions in companies. And like, it was interesting, you just made that distinction when you were talking about, like, I'm going to talk about people, I'm not going to talk about companies. But it's like, the CEO of Shell is a person.
It was BP.
I don't know why I keep talking about Shell, but, whatever. I'm like the CEO of,
It was BP who did that whole campaign about carbon footprints.
Right. Those are choices made by humans, by people. And
For
maybe
profit.
they slightly pressured because of their job, or I don't know. It's like we kind of sometimes give ourselves an out in the workplace. This is getting very unwieldy, this thought, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm like, and I understand why, right? Because we don't have full choice in the workplace. And we're also like, well, I kind of need this salary. And I'm like, is this the hill I want to die on? And then, maybe you get to a point with a job for various reasons where you're just like, I just can't anymore. Like what I'm doing is so far from either what I want to do or my values or whatever. Or you kind of are like, keep being like, okay, I'm not 100% sure about this, but like everyone's doing it, I'm just going to keep doing it. Or I don't know. Anyway, whatever. I don't know. But was that it? Can you help me out with that thought?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's fair. As like humans, we are inherently social creatures, so we can only judge like the right and wrong thing based on like what people around us are doing. Think of like COVID before like masks were mandatory. Some weren't. And as more people around you wore them, you're like, oh, okay, it is dangerous. Okay, I should do that. It is the right thing to do. So I think it's definitely easy to kind of get caught up in
flexible ethics.
Well, no, I think I can see how, if you're in a workplace environment that they all kind of act in a similar way, that, you go along with it. And, also like when you're driving down a highway, like you can't drive significantly slower or faster than the rest because then that's dangerous. So I get that like kind of inherent need to go along with the status quo. But I think as if you're someone like in power, the people who are in charge of these companies, BP and the 99 others, but bring it back to shame. Like, shame on them. They have the power. They know better. They know that they are intentionally, doing marketing efforts to make us feel bad about flying. Meanwhile, they're, drilling new oil projects and making more money, and where that's like where I think the focus should be. Which is what I spent a while trying to find this clip in a video from Our Changing Climate, which is a good YouTube channel of like video essays about our changing climate. It's in the title. And it was about 7 minutes in of this video called How the Rich Really Cause Climate Change. At first I thought it was the video that was titled Why I Don't Care About Your Flight Emissions, which is also a good video. But for the rich one, it starts off like kind of not shaming Taylor Swift, talking about how people did shame her for like all of her private like jet emissions. And I think it was in 2022 recently. And so that's like how it started. And then cuts to about 7 minutes in, it cuts to 11 people in this conference room in Switzerland who work for a private building company called, I'm reading off with my notes here too, Holcim, Holcim, whose main business is cement. And cement and like the building and in the industry sector in general is like, I think the largest kind of sector responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. These 11 people responsible for like making all the decisions for this company are responsible for 156.3 million metric tons of CO2 emissions in 2020, which is almost 19,000 times what our good friend T Swift emitted in private flights in 2022. Oh, that's where the year came in. So like things like this, where it's like all the attention is on Taylor Swift, all the attention is on us, the individuals, for what we eat, how often we fly, all the things. When these like 11 people are responsible for, what is this percent? 0.45% of all carbon emissions globally in 2020, which I know 0.45% could seem small, but for the whole planet, this one company controlled by 11 people responsible for nearly 0.5% of all emissions. All carbon emissions globally. Yeah. It's like the distribution or lack of, or uneven distribution, like just of wealth, period. How few people.
Right. But then it also. Sorry, did you want to continue? But I was going to say that's really interesting. I mean, it's like terrifying and interesting. But then also with the private jet thing, there was in the article, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the article we talked about 2 weeks ago, about wealth, but it also did have a statistic showing how much more emissions a private jet causes as per individual than you flying in like a commercial flight. So even then there's like a proportion, it's like leveled, right? It's like
it's like your diet, like eating or drinking like a a fresh squeezed orange juice is better than the one with added sugar, but eating an orange is even better. So like, yeah, there's like levels to it. And that I'm not saying, yeah, T Swift, great, keep up with your private jet.
Right.
She could definitely cut back. There are people, and I think also in this video I mentioned like Al Gore, how after his documentary, I'm blanking on the name, Inconvenient Truth, they like shamed him or like pointed the finger at him for like his, you know, electricity bill for like his mansion, which, yeah, he could cut back. Yeah. But like, if we're at a point with like climate change, climate crisis, where it's like an overflowing bathtub, like, okay, where I think we're getting distracted with just like scooping a cup of water out. Like, we need to turn off the faucet, which is like taking down the fossil fuel industry, like the people who are at the source of it. And I don't think that means that we should just forget all of like the smaller things.
But do you think that those 11 people are aware of what they're doing?
I think so.
Or do they just think they're doing their job?
I think they are maximizing profit, because that's the name of the game in our capitalist society, is maximum profit at the expense of the workers in these factories, at the expense of the planet. It's like profit above all else. So I think they're aware of it. I think there is like a mental kind of thing too. I think I listened to a podcast episode called Why Billionaires Shouldn't Exist with the Yikes podcast with Michaela Loach and Joe Becker. So that was they made interesting points. I'll link that because I think I might have mentioned this before. They definitely were a bit more eloquent on how they talked about that there is, I think, a different mindset when you are in that position.
Right.
Similar to, or maybe not similar, but I'm thinking of just my own experience of like how a surgeon has to remove themselves from like the actual like impact they can have. Like, it's the life or death. They have to remove themselves from that so that they can do their job. So I wonder if there's like other, like some sort of mental thing that like characteristic, or I don't know what to call it, a flaw, or just, I don't know, something that you kind of, maybe they are aware, but like don't let themselves connect with, because their job is profit. So I don't know.
And I think the more you practice something like that, or that kind of mindset, like the more you lie, the easier it is to keep lying. You know, like when you kind of cross lines with certain things, I think this is making a very big generalized point, but I think there's some truth to it, that it just becomes like easier and easier. It's like, oh, I've done it once, so whatever was holding me back before was not strong enough. So I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
All right, we have
cut off soon. I think we're at 2 minutes, but I just want to bring it back to like, this is when I think this is a good place to bring it back to like viewing these companies as people and like, okay, humanizing them so that we can like communicate with them and let them. Because if their goal is profit and fossil fuel becomes less profitable, or cement industry building, cement becomes less profitable in the like building and industry sector, then they will have to shift, because they won't make a profit if there's less reliance, less need for these materials, for fossil fuel, etc. So,
God, it's so complex.
And an easy place to start, and I'll link it in the show notes, is there's a petition you can sign going around for the Biden administration. They're like, looks like they're haven't officially like given it the green light for this Willow oil project. So there's like a really easy thing you can fill out online. And then there's options to like leave a voice, like to call, which I do want to do, but it is harder to do because phone calls, to stop this oil project in the Arctic that Trump like was pushing it through, but then it got stopped for environmental reasons. But now the Biden administration is pushing it through, despite him saying, you know, I care about the climate basically, and like we're gonna, you know, make moves to make things a bit better. So this just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it does in the context of our capitalist society and money and profit and powerful people at play. So dismantle the fossil fuel industry is, I think, where I would like to. I just want to shift my mindset a bit more to these people, these few people who are in charge. So, and looking into more ways that I can do that.
Kind of strategic effort.
Yeah, more strategic effort, while still living my life how I choose to, because it feels
it's in
good.
line with your values.
Exactly. So I think we'll leave it there because we're less than a minute. I don't know how many seconds are left. So, all right, check out all links and resources. Thank you for listening. Head to the show notes, thetonsustainableliving.com/episode 25, and we will
25.
see you in the next one. Woohoo! Bye.
I love it. Woo. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast.
Now, go share it with a friend,
a coworker,
a partner,
a family member,
or whoever.
A pet, your cat,
someone on the street, whoever you think could use a little more support on their sustainability journey. Share it.
You can send them over to our website, theteonsustainableliving.com. And while you're there, check out the show notes for more info on today's topic.
All right, give a shitters. See you later. Get it? See you later, as in see you later. So funny.
Brandy.